Because of some changes, your job is gone, Julia stated, never even looking up from her tablet. That was it, my goodbye after 19 years at Northmere Dynamics. It was a cold conference room with security already waiting just outside. My name's Patrick Greer and I'm 59. I was a senior financial controller. We made industrial stuff, used to be good stuff, before the venture capitalists took over. I'd spent close to 20 years making sure all the numbers were spot on, down to the last cent. Damon chimed in, "We need your keycard and parking pass," as he shoved a cardboard box across the table. "Security will walk you to get your stuff." I just nodded, didn't fight it, didn't beg. I just watched Julia's perfect nails tapping away on the glass. "Do you have anything you want to say, Patrick?" Her voice implied she was expecting some tears or an outburst, something to make her feel better about it all. "Nope, thanks for the chance." I stood up, straightened my tie, and held my leather portfolio under my arm. My wife had given it to me 15 years ago, before cancer took her. Before I had filled my days with spreadsheets and reports to keep from falling apart in our empty house. Human Resources will get in touch about your retirement package. Damon really laid it on with that retirement part. We both knew I was 5 years short of getting the full benefits. Kyle, the security guy, looked mortified walking behind me to my office. "So sorry, Mr. Greer," he muttered as I gently wrapped my late wife's picture in tissue paper. "No worries, Kyle," I told him. I set my keycard on the desk, but kept my leather portfolio clutched to my chest. It held a flash drive packed with 3 years of carefully gathered evidence. Every fishy vendor payment, every shady wire transfer, every suddenly scrapped audit. Julia and Damon figured they were getting rid of the old accountant, who kept asking questions about those new consulting fees popping up in the budgets. They had no clue. I'd been documenting everything since the day Julia lost those vendor verification forms. Since Damon started booting out anyone who poked holes in the new executive expense policy. I walked through the lobby, past my colleagues who suddenly became super interested in their shoes. 19 years of loyalty got me a cardboard box and a lot of turned backs. I didn't crack a smile until I got to my car. They thought I was leaving with nothing. But I was leaving with everything they didn't want anyone to find. I hadn't always been this suspicious. The first 15 years at Northmere had been great. I started when it was still family-run by old Harold Northmere himself, a guy who checked the product quality first thing before he even had his coffee. "Numbers don't lie, Patrick," he used to say. "People do." My job was always to make sure the figures added up. After Harold the old man retired, his son sold the place to these investors. At first, things didn't really change much. A few sneaky shortcuts here and there, cheaper stuff, putting off fixing the equipment. Nothing that screamed trouble, you know. Then they started changing everything. New bosses, a whole new way of doing things. Julia showed up, straight from a huge company known for being cutthroat. Damon came along 6 months later, always going on about corporate culture. I tried to give them the benefit of the doubt, right up until that first quarterly report under the new guise. "These payments to vendors don't match what we actually got," I said, pointing it out. Julia just gave me this big, fake smile. "We're switching suppliers, it'll all even out." But it didn't, and my follow-up emails, ignored. Then came the fancy getaways, the crazy fees to these consulting companies I couldn't even find. Expense reports with the same charges, over and over, always getting approved. I started keeping track, secretly made a second set of books. The real ones safely backed up offsite. I didn't plan on doing anything with it, it was just Harold's words kept running through my head. Numbers don't lie. The whole place was shifting too. The young ones, the ones connected to Julia or Damon, got promoted. The people who'd been there forever were moved around or nudged toward early retirement. Greg from purchasing came to my office after he found some messed up invoices. "Something's not right, Patrick," he whispered. 2 weeks later, poof, Greg was history. They said it was performance issues, but that was a load of crap. Ellie, my daughter, picked up on it right away. "You're working late every night, Dad," she'd said. "What's going on?" I couldn't tell her. Ellie had just made partner, she was riding high. She didn't need my problems on top of her crazy busy season. But I was lying to her. The truth was, when Damon shook things up in the finance department last month, putting his clueless nephew between me and the big boss, I knew I was toast. So I started making copies, tons of them. I gathered proof, built a timeline of every shady deal, every sneaky rule change that took away all our financial safeguards. It wasn't about revenge. It was about remembering what Harold always drilled into us. Numbers don't lie. It really hit me when I pulled into the driveway that day. For the first time in 20 years, I had nothing to do the next morning. No reports, no deadlines, no crazy month-end close to stress over. I just sat there in the car, staring at the front door. The house felt different, empty somehow, even though nothing had actually changed. I put the box of stuff on the kitchen counter and poured myself a couple fingers of that good whiskey I save for special occasions. This definitely qualified, though not exactly how I pictured my career ending. Then the phone rang. It was Ellie. "Dad," she said, "Tina from accounting just called. She said you got let go. What happened?" I gave her the watered-down, safe-for-work version. "They said my job was gone, some corporate jargon about restructuring." "That's crap," my daughter Ellie said. "She's got that lawyer brain, you know. They can't just do that after 19 years without a reason. We should sue." I had to stop her gently. "No, honey, no lawsuits." "But Dad," she started. "Trust me," I told her. I took a slow drink of whiskey. Some fights, I realized, just aren't fought in court. After we hung up, I went to my office and fired up the computer. I had everything on a flash drive, my whole portfolio, all organized by date, what happened, the type of thing, and how much money. 3 years of shady financial stuff, all neatly laid out with the proof. I started a new document and began typing. It wasn't a rant or a threat. Just the facts, straight and simple, times, dates, amounts. The emails for the SEC and the State Attorney General were already in the to box. My finger hovered over the send button. Could I really do this? This wasn't just some mistakes, some accidental messing up of numbers. This was flat-out cheating. People would lose their jobs, maybe even face charges. The whole company Herald could crumble. I shut the laptop. No email. Instead, I found myself digging out an old photo album. Pictures from Harold's retirement party, the old gang, my wife, Diane, beside me at the company picnic. We were both so much younger then, had no idea the cancer was already eating away at her. "What would you do, Diane?" I whispered, looking at her picture. I already knew the answer. Honesty was always Diane's thing. "Do the right thing," she'd always say. "The rest is just garbage." That night, I tossed and turned. But when morning arrived, something inside me had shifted. The initial shock had worn off, and a cold, clear understanding settled in. This wasn't about my job anymore. It wasn't even about me. It was about what Harold had built, about the vendors getting screwed. It was about the employees who would eventually suffer because of the higher-up selfishness. I brewed some coffee, automatically straightened my tie, a habit from nearly 2 decades, and picked up the phone. "James, it's Patrick Greer. I need to talk to you about some financial shenanigans at Northmere Dynamics." "Yeah, it's bad. Can we get together today?" James Parker, who I used to room with in college, was now a federal prosecutor, and he focused on white-collar crime. The first domino had fallen. 3 days after meeting with James, a certified letter arrived from Northmere's legal department. The generous severance package they offered demanded I sign a confidentiality agreement, which meant I couldn't talk about anything related to the company ever. The money offered was a joke. 3 months' pay for 19 years of loyalty. I called Ellie for legal advice. After she looked over the papers, she said, "They're definitely nervous. This is way more than a typical non-disclosure agreement. What happens if I don't sign? They're threatening to fight your unemployment and keep your unused vacation pay." Her words were tough, and I knew she was probably right legally. They were banking on me not being able to afford a fight. I thanked her, said I'd consider it. What I didn't let on was that I'd already made up my mind. That afternoon, my doorbell chimed. Julia was there, a smile plastered on her face that didn't feel real. "Patrick," she chirped, like we were practically buddies. "Can I come in? Just wanted to see how you were doing." I let her in but didn't offer her anything to drink. "Here's the severance stuff," she said, slapping a new copy on my coffee table. "There was a misunderstanding. We can give you 2 more months' pay if you sign today." "What's the hurry?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. Her smile got a little tighter. "The board is wrapping up next quarter's budget. Gotta get everything settled." "Like paying vendors properly." The words just kind of spilled out. Something flashed in her eyes. "I'm not sure what you mean," she said. "The Westbrook invoices," I said carefully. "The ones that appeared in the system without any inventory receipts." "Clerical errors," she replied, smooth as silk. "Already handled." "And the consulting payments to Everlight Partners," I continued, "the company that shares an address with your brother-in-law's home office." The room suddenly felt freezing. Julia's smile disappeared entirely. "I'd be careful about making accusations, Patrick, especially baseless ones that could be seen as slanderous." Her voice was ice cold now. So they asked if I took company files when I left, flat out accusing me of stealing. I told them the truth, that I only had copies of my own stuff, which was perfectly fine according to the employee handbook. She just stood up suddenly and said I had until the next day to think over their severance deal. Then she said things could get messy with my retirement if I didn't. Right after she left, I got a text from a weird number saying basically, lay off or else. They knew about the flash drive. That night, there was a car parked across the street, and it was still there when I woke up. Later that day, the bank called about someone trying to get into my accounts with my social security number, but they used the wrong passwords. Then my email blew up with tons of subscriptions I never signed up for, all wanting money right away. It was obvious they were trying to scare me. They were showing me they could mess up my life, wreck my credit, and even watch my house. I called James back. I told him they were really coming after me. He wasn't surprised, but he sounded worried. He said it meant there was more going on than just bad accounting. He told me to send him everything, the severance offer, the text, the bank stuff, and to keep track of anyone watching me. I asked if my evidence was enough. He paused, then said my stuff was pretty strong, but big companies like Northmere have tons of lawyers who will just call it all a big coincidence or blame it on accounting mistakes. I needed more help, someone on the inside. Hanging up, I felt completely isolated. They were all over me, squeezing me, and I was outgunned. At least for now I was. A week after Julia came by, my old assistant, Teresa, called. Her voice was shaky, all hushed up. She wanted to meet, somewhere off the grid. No public places, definitely not my house. We settled on my brother's cabin outside St. Louis. He was down in Florida for the winter, so it would be empty. Teresa looked wiped out when she showed up, constantly glancing in her rearview mirror as she pulled into the driveway. The minute we were inside, she blurted it out. "They're doing an audit," she said. "But it's not a real audit. They're cooking the books, Patrick, faking approvals, making up records that aren't even there." I was stunned. "How do you know all this?" I asked. "They brought in consultants from Damon's old place," she explained. "They don't know I still have access to the system logs. They're still using your old login." She tossed a flash drive onto the table. "I've been keeping a record of everything," she said. "The before and after." I stared at the little thing. "You're risking everything," I said, my voice tight. "They're already getting rid of my job next month," she said, a bitter laugh escaping her. "I found out when they accidentally CC'd me on the restructuring email. What Teresa showed me was way worse than I ever imagined. This wasn't just some fancy accounting or a few extra perks for the bigwigs. Northmere, they were totally ripping off the government, you know. Overcharging on contracts, faking paperwork for parts that were seriously unsafe, and making up inventory numbers to boost their value. It was insane. Teresa showed me this email thread. "Oh, there's more," she said. "They're about to sell off their manufacturing part to some private equity firm. Nobody working there will even know until it's done. And the pension fund," her face said it all. I knew it was bad, but they've been raiding it for over a year. If this sale goes through, there won't be enough money to pay everyone what they're owed. Hundreds of families, their retirement savings, years and years of work all on the line. I asked her who else knew, just the top brass. "And me now," she paused, then said, "and someone else, I think. Drew from Quality Control started asking questions a month ago. He vanished a week before you did. Fired." I asked. "That's the weird part," she said. "No paperwork. His file says he quit, but his security pass wasn't turned in and his desk was cleared out overnight." My gut went cold. I asked if she'd heard from him. Nope, just went straight to voicemail. Driving home, I had this awful feeling it was way worse than just some accounting scam. The surveillance car was gone from my street, but honestly, that didn't make me feel any better. I called Drew's number, voicemail, just like Teresa said. I left a message, something vague about getting together, maybe some job leads, so I called James again. "We gotta speed things up," I told him, filling him in on what Teresa had told me. He said this throws a wrench in everything. He agreed that the pension fund thing was a huge deal. "I'll talk to the higher-ups first thing tomorrow." Then he hesitated. "Patrick," he said quietly, "be careful. If they're cooking the books this bad, they're freaking out." He was right, desperate people do crazy things. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I kept replaying everything in my head. Drew, Harold, Northmere, the guy who trusted me to keep everything above board, and all those guys in the factory, the warehouse workers, who'd put in years and years of work, all banking on those pensions. At 2 in the morning, my alarm went off, saying there was something going on in my backyard. By the time I got to the window, whoever it was had already split. But my home office window was open just a crack. They weren't just watching me anymore. They were straight up sending a message. I knew then, nowhere was safe. I didn't wait around for them to make the next move. By sunrise, I was putting a plan into action, a plan I'd been working on since Teresa spilled the beans. First, I moved all my proof, all the documents, along with Teresa's stuff, to 3 different safe places. One set went to Ellie, with instructions to only open them if something happened to me. Another went into a safe deposit box at a bank where Julia's reach couldn't get to. The third I encrypted and sent to James, with the decryption key delivered completely separately. So I got in touch with Greg from purchasing. They'd let him go months before me. We met up at this greasy spoon, a couple towns away. He looked grim and just said, "Man, I've been waiting for this call." I told him what was going down, and wouldn't you know it, he'd seen the same shady stuff. I started asking some pointed questions and bam, suddenly security's escorting me out for breaking some company rule. I asked him if they'd threatened him. Not directly, he said, but a week later, someone broke into his place. Nothing big was missing, just his laptop and some files. He leaned in real close and said, "I reported it to the cops. Kept everything documented. Never thought it'd matter, but it shows a pattern, you know." I asked if he'd be willing to give a statement. He nodded right away. He said he'd been feeling like a total wimp for keeping quiet so long. By that afternoon, I'd talked to 2 more ex-employees, same story. Each of them had a piece of the puzzle. Stuff like departments where the numbers were totally off, projects that vanished from the company's records, and safety issues that were just swept under the rug. Then James called with some big news. The feds, the actual U.S. Attorney's Office, were interested, but they needed more evidence, especially about how they were messing with the pension fund. He said, "We need current financial records. Otherwise, Northmere's lawyers will say they fixed everything after you guys left." Teresa was really taking a huge chance. Just talking to me, let alone asking her to get more documents, could put her in serious trouble. That's when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Then I heard the voice, barely a whisper. "Patrick, Drew." I walked out of the coffee shop, my eyes scanning the street. "Where are you? Are you all right?" His voice was all frantic, like he was scared to death. "Listen close," he blurted. "It's the Bentonville deal. Check the test results against the paperwork. They're using faulty parts in military trucks." "Drew," I whispered. "Where are they?" He sounded threatened, his voice cracking. "I'm getting out of town," he choked out. "But somebody's gotta stop them before someone gets hurt." Then, click, dead line. Military contracts, bad parts. This wasn't about the money anymore. It was about people's lives. I rang James right away, spilling everything Drew had said. He was on it instantly. "This changes everything," he said. "I'm getting the Department of Defense involved. Can you get to my office now?" 3 hours later, I was in a conference room with James and a couple of serious-looking guys from the duty. I laid it all out: the shady finances, the fake documents, how they'd looted the pension fund, and now this military contract mess. One of the investigators said, "We'll need your full cooperation. This is going to blow up fast. Your safety could be at risk. We can set up protection." I shook my head. "I've got a better plan." The next day I called Julia herself. My voice was all low and defeated. "I've been thinking about that severance package," I said. "I'd like to talk about the details." She sounded smug, barely hiding her glee. "Wise move," she purred. "Come to the office tomorrow at 9 and we'll wrap things up," she said. "Actually," I said back, "I'd feel better somewhere else. Somewhere neutral, like the Lakeside Hotel. They have meeting rooms that are private." She paused, then gave in. Little did she know the Lakeside was already swarming with feds. The rooms were bugged and every door was being watched. The whole thing was a setup, and Julia was walking right into it. The Magnolia room at the Lakeside Hotel was way too quiet. As Julia went over the papers I brought, her lawyer was right there beside her, whispering now and then. "Everything looks good," she finally said, pushing the non-disclosure agreement toward me. "Just sign here and we can leave all this behind us." I looked at the document. 12 pages of legal mumbo-jumbo designed to shut me up for good. Beside it was the severance check. 5 months' pay for 19 years of my life. "Before I sign," I said slowly, "I need to clear something up. This covers everything that has to do with the company, right? Including the problems with the pension fund and the Bentonville military contract." The lawyer looked tense. Julia's smile kind of flickered for a second. "Everything company-related," she said, calm as could be. "Standard stuff." I nodded, reached for a pen, and then stopped. Just one more question. Does this agreement let me off the hook for reporting federal crimes I've seen? What are you getting at? The lawyer said, leaning forward. I'm not getting at anything. I stood up slowly. I'd already told the feds everything about the fraud, the stolen money, the way they put people in danger. Even this conversation was part of the evidence. Just then, the conference room door swung open. In walked James, with FBI agents and DOD investigators right behind him. Julia Stokes, one of the agents said, "We've got a warrant to search every Northmere Dynamics building and take any financial records connected to government contracts." Julia went white as a sheet when James put a huge folder down on the table. "This is just the tip of the iceberg," he said softly. "We're showing the rest to a grand jury right this minute." Julia made a grab for her phone, but an agent stopped her, real gentle-like. "Damon Ellis and the CEO are being brought in for questioning too," he told her, along with a bunch of the board members. I didn't stick around to see them take Julia away. My job was finished. 6 months after they made the arrests over at the Lakeside Hotel, I found myself back at the old Northmere factory, watching the workers on the assembly line. The machines were humming the same way they had for years, but everything else was different. The company had been under court control during the investigation. Once things calmed down, a group of employees had somehow managed to buy the manufacturing part of the business, using money from some state fund meant to help the local economy. They'd changed the name to Northmere Legacy Manufacturing, and they'd asked me to come in and help them get their finances set up right, with everything open and above board. Okay, so I was done for the day. Mr. Greer, the security guy, remember him? He used to kick me out, just nodded as I signed out. "Almost," I told him, handing back my visitor pass. Ellie was waiting in her car. "So how'd it go?" she asked as I hopped in. "Good," I said. "They've got a great team there, they'll be just fine without me breathing down their necks." I looked back at the building one last time. Harold would have been proud. We drove for a bit without saying much. It had been all over the news, Those execs arrested, charges, plea deals, they even got some of the pension money back. Not all of it, but enough that most people wouldn't lose their houses. Julia and Damon were going to trial. The CEO, he flipped. The whole thing was old news now, replaced by some other scandal. Ellie asked as we pulled into my driveway, "Any regrets?" I thought about that for a minute. "Nope," I finally said. "It wasn't about getting even. I did what I had to do because it was the right thing." That night, I packed away my Northmere files. Everything was there, all documented, but I didn't need to keep it all close anymore. Tomorrow, I start part-time as a financial ethics consultant for a manufacturers group. I'm gonna help other companies build systems that make it tougher for the next Julia and Damon to cook the books. Not a bad way to end things, huh? A 59-year-old accountant, just trying to make the numbers tell the truth.